Gospel of Matthew. To the Gospel of Matthew, starting at chapter 10, starting at verse 26. Ending at verse 31. So do not be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs of your head are numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Amen. I want to tag this rather. He knows. He knows. Pray with me. Grace, peace, calmness, yet with clarity. Allow me to do that which you have called me to do. I need you. In Jesus Christ, this is my prayer. Amen. He knows. Often at times, we can never get what we're supposed to get for no other reason besides the fact that we are afraid. And when you become afraid, it grips your movement. It shackles your feet. It chains your hands. And it puts a muzzle on your mouth for no other reason besides the fact that you are afraid. And to be afraid is to beget a troubled heart. And we can't afford to have a troubled heart because we are afraid of death. Our hearts sometimes are troubled. That's why while I walk down in front of the family as they're about to approach their loved one who is laid out in the casket, is not breathing any longer, eyes are closed, I say that popular phrase, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way. You know the place where I'm going, because I have told you. But yet, still knowing God's promises, still knowing God's truth, and still knowing God's word, there's something about us where we are afraid to speak up, we are afraid to stand up, and we are afraid to move forward. What is life worth if you can't stand up to speak up? What is life worth if you can't go forward in the will of God to grab the things that God has promised you? What is life worth if all that you have is to be afraid? That's why we have some men who refuse to be husbands, because they are afraid of some of the stereotypes that has been clawed on them and won't let them go. So they'll rather be everything else besides a husband because they are afraid. We have some young boys, some young men who refuse to pull up their pants, refuse to study, refuse to try to achieve the great marks, because the reality is nothing other besides the fact that they are afraid. And when you are afraid, you cannot do that which God would have you to do. The world is before us. Heaven is our destination. Nothing is stopping you between heaven and earth besides you being afraid. Afraid to achieve the best. Afraid to get that which you know is rightfully yours. Afraid to do what God has called you to do. Nothing else besides the fact that you are afraid. Afraid to love. Afraid to care. Afraid to hug. Afraid to preach the gospel, though you have been called to preach the gospel. Afraid to take that next step, only because something about you and in you creates this thing in you that won't let you go, and that is called to be afraid. And when you are afraid, you shiver at night. When you are afraid, you can't sleep at night. When you are afraid, you can't make it through because you are afraid. And you know, that's where this chapter opens up at. It opens up with Jesus instructing his disciples. Now realize, my brothers and sisters, for 9 chapters, they've been with Jesus. He called them from the seas of Galilee, from their fisher nets, to be fisher of men. And he's been walking with them, and he's been talking with them. He has shown them miracles day in and day out. And now it's time for the test, Dr. Detman. You've been with me. You know what I'm about. You know what I have done. Now is the time for the test. I'm about to send you out. And here in this 10th chapter, he is sending his disciples out. And he tells them all the things that they need to do. First, he says, do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans, because this gospel of Matthew was written from a Jewish perspective. And we know that Jesus came back first for the Jews. And then he says, don't mix with the Samaritans, because if you mix with the Samaritans, we have bad blood with the Samaritans. I don't want you to talk to the Samaritans first. I want you to go to the house of Israel and seek those who are lost. It says the kingdom of heaven is near. And listen to their directions and listen to what he tells them to do. He says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely you give. And we need to pause right there, because God has given all of us the same commandments. Go out and do that which I have already shown you in these scriptures, and do that which the disciples had already seen me do. You've watched, you've learned, you've memorized. Now is the time to do. Go. Go to the prisons. Go. Go to the homeless. Go. Go to the clothers. Go. Go to those who do not know who I am. But whatever you do, you have to get out. But I can't afford for you to be afraid, because I'm giving you the directions. Freely you receive peace. Go, give peace. Freely you have been given love. Go, give love. Freely you have been given kindness. Go, give it. Why? Because it has been freely given to you. And anything, my brothers and sisters, that God has given to you is not for you to hold on to. It's for you to give. And too many of us want to hold on to that which God has given us, but he only gave it to you that you may go out and give it to somebody else.
You cannot choke or suffocate those things which God has given you. Because when you try, then it becomes a yoke around your neck instead of giving that which God has given. What has he given you that you can no longer hold on to? Go, give it. And then it amazes me because in his directions, look what he tells the disciples. He says, do not take along any gold or silver or copper in your belts. Take no bag for the journey, or extra tunic, or sandals, or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep. In other words, all the things that we need to do outside of these walls, he has already given to us. You don't need to take anything extra. In other words, we don't need more money to do more ministry. We just need more of a heart. We don't need more programs to be effective. We just need more of Jesus in us. We don't need more singing to give God the worship in his house. We just need more folk who understand that God woke them up this morning, gave them breath in their lungs, and has given them sight to see, lungs to breathe, inhale and exhale, and a mouth to speak. We don't need more music. We just need more folk with the right heart to sing. To go out in this world, you don't need this extra stuff. To go out in the world, you don't need to go to the prisons. And why go to the prisons? Because you know that there was one time when you were confined. And you understand the feeling of being confined, and you no longer want anybody else to be confined. That's why you go to the prisons. Go feed the homeless. Why? Because when you go to the homeless, you know what it is to be homeless. And let's be honest, all of us are homeless. Because you do know the earth is not yours. Heaven is your home. So just for a little while, you homeless until you get to the divine destination of God. So because you know how it is to be homeless, you ought to go where someone who has no house, no roof over their head, and show them what God has given you. As I gave to you freely, freely give to others. In other words, we don't need much to do ministry. And I'm always baffled how we always lack in doing ministry. Not just us as a church, but for the entire church. Every church on every corner. We don't lack to do ministry because there's not enough ministry to do. We lack of the laborers of God's work. And then he says, whatever town or village you enter, search for some worthy person there and stay at his house until you have as into the home. Give it to your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that home or town. And I have to pause there because too many of us wants to stay at the same place talking to the same folk. Every now and then, if you said what God has told you to say, then all you can do then is shake off the dust off of your feet and move on because there's some more folk that you need to come in contact with. We waste our breath on the same folk about the same time. Over the same stuff. Just shake off the dust. It's all right. As I heard someone say, and even in the gospel, you do the planting, let God do the watering. And don't get caught up in it. So he's sending them out, and he says to them, the most amazing thing to me, I'm amazing as I come and I'm getting close. He says to them, I'm sending you out as sheep into a land of wolves. My God. You sending me out as a sheep, and you're telling me there's wolves out there? You're sending me out into this world to do your work, and you're telling me everyone won't be nice? There's wolves out there? Oh, I've come to learn, and I realize that I have no problem. Y'all don't mind if I get a little transparent, a little personal. I have no problem helping sheep. I have no problem dealing with wolves, brother. I can look at a wolf and understand a wolf and know how to counteract a wolf. I can look at a wolf and understand the grin in his face and all of that. I can look in the eyes of a wolf and understand what I have to do. But you know what hurts me the most? When I have to look at God's sheep and they bite me. I can't handle when a sheep bite me, but I can handle when a wolf grins. God is saying, go out. You're like a sheep, don't mess with some wolves and be careful. But I'm giving you the directions. As long as you do what I tell you to do, you will be all right. Because there's something about interacting with the wolf that you'll learn something about me. Ask David how he handled the wolf. He understood who I was, and with his bare little small hands, he ripped off the head of a bear and was able to defeat a bear because he had the power of God in him. And then he'd keep on telling them, brother will betray brother. It gets kind of grimy. It gets kind of sad. Mother will turn against daughter, and father will turn against kids, and kids will turn against parents. And then he gets to this section where he tells us, so do not be afraid. Now, maybe you can accept that, but I struggled. You sending me out. You done already set the atmosphere. You done already told me that I have nothing that I would take with me, because if you told me to deal with wolves, I want to take a gun, I want to take a knife, I want to take a switchblade, I want to take something to prepare for war. But yet and still, you tell me not to take any of that, and then you're going to tell me not to be afraid. How dare you, God? How? Then it rings in my ears. He says, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. That what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. And I want to stop there, because sometimes we yell out some stuff that we are not supposed to yell out. We lash out at folk that we are not supposed to lash out at. Because whenever God gives you some information, matter of fact, let me just pause there. Matter of fact, don't tell anybody anything that God hasn't whispered to you in your ear. And too many of us take the time to say something that God never told us. And yet we stand as though we have the right and the authority to say that which God has. No, God didn't tell you that. Did he whisper it to you? Did he haven't told you? Are you in the dark? I find it amazing when God speaks to me the most, y'all. He does not speak to me when I'm on the mountaintop. He does not speak to me when I am doing well and everything is going great. No, God doesn't speak to me. Then I'm just telling you my experience. I don't know about yours. I'm not trying to figure out yours, but I'm just telling you my experiences. The reality is God has spoken to me the most times when I have been in the valley, low down, deep, drowning in the water, drowning in the sea. And somehow, in some way, God whispers to my soul, and God whispers in my ear, and God lets me know I have not left you, and neither have I forsaken you. It's only in the midnight hour when God whispers to me and tells me what my soul needs to hear and tells me what my heart needs to feel. God whispers to me only at the nighttime, and then when he whispered to me, then I can proclaim it. Listen to what else he says. He says, do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Oh, I realize that's how our loved ones were able to make it through slavery, because they understood that though the slave master can kill the body, the slave master cannot kill the soul. They understood that they can stand up and fight slavery. They can stand up and fight the Jim Crow laws. They can stand up and fight for the civil rights movement, because they understood that there's more to this living and there's more places to go besides this place. You can harm the body, but you can never take my soul. Oh, some folk will tear you down with their words, but they cannot tear down your soul. Some folk will put their hand on you and they will slap you, they will beat you, but guess what? They cannot take care of your soul. Your soul belongs to God and God only. Then we get to this part and I'm done. So there are not two sparrows sold for a penny. I baffled over this because I did not understand what a sparrow was. I know that song, you know, his eyes watches over me. I know that song, but I never really looked at what a sparrow was. I never looked at the value of a sparrow. I never looked at the movement of a sparrow. And I wonder, why didn't Jesus say an eagle? Isaiah said, if you wait, that he'll give you strength, that you can mount up like an eagle. He said that, so why wouldn't Jesus use an eagle? Confused. I did not understand. Well, why would he not use a bluebird or a robin bird? Because they sing the songs of heaven. Why not use them? They can give you some sense of understanding when the birds whisper in your ears. Why did he not use them? Why a sparrow? Until I reached down deep and started to realize that he used the sparrow because, watch this, y'all, the sparrow is the lowest of all the birds. The sparrow is the least of all the birds. And not only that, but the sparrow in general, they stay around each other. There's always a bunch of sparrows around. They're never by themselves. Matter of fact, if a sparrow is by himself, he is lost, or the one that was with him has died. And now, do you remember in the Psalms when the psalmist said that, I feel like a sparrow on the rooftop? Because he realized that he had never seen a sparrow by itself. So he used the sparrow. Not only that, but the sparrows are a type of bird. They like to go down and they like to just, they take up all of the stuff that's on the ground. They don't have much. They pick up this and they pick up that and then they fly away. A sparrow is not worth much, and we know a sparrow is not worth much because look what it says. It says, a penny will buy me a sparrow. And the reality is that if you could not get a dove, that then you would take a penny. In other words, a sparrow was the food of the peasants. Y'all know, I remember sitting at a table with some brothers, and they will know when I say this, that one brother had mentioned that as he was growing up, that in his house, when they had a cookout, he was never allowed to eat steak. Because steak was only for special folk. Steak was only for his mother. Steak was only for the adults. But as a kid, he could never have steak. Matter of fact, he said, I never had steak until I bought my own steak. In other words, there's some food that is only the rich eat some type of food. And only some special folk eat some type of food. And here it is, the sparrow is not worth much. Listen to what he says. He says, they sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. In other words, if a sparrow is not worth much, and yet God still knows the sparrow. That's the good part. He knows the mundane. He knows the minute. He knows the little things in life. He knows God, if he can know what's going on with the sparrow. If a sparrow falls from the sky, it's not out of his will. If the sparrow stops not to have food, God knows. And if he loves a sparrow, and if he cares about a sparrow, surely he cares about me. And that's where I want to stop at, because I want the graduates to know as you go out into this world, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of those who can hurt the body. They cannot hurt the soul. Don't be afraid about folk who whisper in the backgrounds of who you are and what you are. God knows all there is to know. He knows. He knows what bothers my heart. He knows what hurts me in the midnight hour. He knows what draws tears out my eyes. He knows what I think about and what I do. He knows. He has to know. Because I cannot handle this life without him. If there's not a God out there, out where, brother? Beyond the highest mountain. Out where, my brother? Beyond the highest cloud. Out where, my brother? Beyond the last galaxy. Out where, my brother? Beyond the beyond. I need a God out there that knows about me. He knows what makes me shivers. He knows what makes me cringe. He knows what's deep in my soul and deep in my heart. He knows what makes me pain and what's agony besides me. He knows when I don't have enough food on the table. He knows when stuff is bothering me so bad I don't want to get up in the middle of the morning. He knows. And I need a God who knows. That's the good news of the gospel. The good news of the gospel is that he knows. I know some of us want other folk to know, but I've gotten beyond that. I don't want you to know anything, Dr. Detman. I don't want you to know anything, Sharon. I don't want you to know anything, Kennedy. I don't want you to know anything, Kiki. I got a God. He made me. He shaped me. He fashioned me. Matter of fact, the record says he knows the number of hairs that's on my head. And if he knows the number of hairs that's on my head, then he knows all that exists about me. That's the good news. And he tells them, though I send you out, and though you have the world before you, don't worry. Be happy. Just go on. Fight the good battle. Go on. Run the race. Go on and do what you have to do. And when it gets hard, don't worry. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the classrooms. Don't be afraid of the house. Don't be afraid of the community, because he knows. And the reason why he knows is because a sparrow once said, he said, he knows there is about me. And then some man stood up and said, well, what about me? The sparrow said, he knows what I'm about to eat. But then some man stood up and said, what about me? The sparrow said, he knows when I'm about to fall. But the man said, well, what about me? And then Jesus stood up on the throne and he says, look at Calvary. And when you look at Calvary, then you ought to be able to know, because on Calvary I filled up the gap of despair. On Calvary I cleaned up your sin. On Calvary I washed away all the ills. On Calvary I gave you what you needed. Why? Because I know a lamb wouldn't take care of you. I know a goat wouldn't take care of you. I know a bull would not take care of you. I know a priest would not take care of you. So I stood up, looked at myself, and said, since I know what they need, let me go down and die for my people. Because I know. Hey, I know. He knows every teacher. He knows every test. He knows every opposition. He knows every friend, and he knows every foe. He knows every addiction, and he knows what does not God know? I don't know what he does not know. Job asked him some questions, and he said, Job, since you think you know it all, I have some questions for you. And then Job said, well, what are your questions? He said, well, Job, tell me. I want you to look out into the sea and tell me who makes the sea comes in and out. Job said, I don't know. He said, well, it must be you, God. And then he said, Job, while you're looking out on the sea, do me one favor. I'm tired of letting folk know, so I want you to get down on your knees, and I want you to start counting all the grains of the sand and tell me how many sands are on the beach. And Job said, that's too much for me. God is all on you. He said, but Job, look out there in the stars and tell me and name all the stars one by one. And Job said, I don't know, God. That seems too much for me. He said, but Job, guess what? I know. I know the stars. I know.
I know every Atlantic Ocean, every Pacific Ocean, every Indian Ocean, every Galilee, every hill, every mountain, every hurt. I know. He said, guess what, Job? I even know the number of sands that are on the seashore. But that's only for me to know. And then he said, guess what, Job? I even know when I'm going to give you back your fortune. Guess what, Job? I even know when you're going to breathe your last breath. Guess what, Job? I'm going to tell you what I have to give you. And some stuff belongs to me and me by myself. Because the last time I checked, God is God. God will be God. God is the judge. So some things I don't know. But I serve a God who knows. I know God knows when some folk are going to get up and do some work. I know that God knows when some folk are going to stop frowning but yet start smiling. I don't know, but I know when God going to get some folk together because God knows all there is to know. I thank God for knowing. Why? Because he knows the sparrow. And if his eyes is on the sparrow, I know he's watching over me.